The key predictor of success in life is self-awareness.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the Coachable podcast. I'm so glad that you're here for another week and another episode. If you're into personal development, spiritual growth, or you're just navigating life's challenges and looking for a little help along the way, you've made it to the right place, because today I am joined by the incredible Ian Morgan CRON, who is a best-selling author, psychotherapist, and Enneagram teacher, and the host of the wildly popular podcast Typology that has over 20 million downloads. His books include the Enneagram Primer, The Road Back to You, and his newest book, The Story of You, an Enneagram journey to becoming your true self. So if you're looking to let go of your past, heal, and step into the highest version of you, this is an episode you are going to absolutely love, because Ian is known for his transparency, his humor, his depth of insight into the inner workings of the human heart and mind, and he uses the Enneagram personality typing system as a tool to help people cultivate self-awareness and find happiness. He is a popular speaker, a business consultant for organizations like the Discovery Channel, Chick-fil-A, Warner Brothers, and he is giving us so much value in this episode. He breaks down what the Enneagram is, what the 9 types are, as well as the unconscious stories that drive the behavior, actions, feelings of these types, and how we can start to rewrite that narrative. So grab a paper, grab a pen, and you're going to want to take notes for this one. Oh, y'all, it is so good. So let's jump into it. Ian, welcome to the Coachable podcast. I'm very excited for this conversation. I love your work, and I'm just honored to have some time with you today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Tori. It's my pleasure.
I have been following your work for probably about 5 years. I think is the first time I came across your book, The Road Back to You. And it opened up parts of me that I had never looked at before. It kind of cracked me open and was a huge catalyst for a lot of my inner work and personal development journey. It kind of was right at that beginning stage of me doing a lot of seeking and trying to understand myself better. And that's a question that I've been asking myself, I think my whole life, is who am I? And how can I really understand who I am, especially as an adult, and how can I express that in the most authentic way? And I know so many of my listeners are on that journey. I would love for you to tell our listeners and just give them an idea of what is the Enneagram. Give us a high level overview of what it is and why it's useful, and especially as it pertains to understanding ourselves better.
Yeah, of course. So the Enneagram is a personality typing system that teaches there are 9 basic personality styles in the world, one of which we gravitate toward and adopt in childhood as a way to cope, to protect ourselves, and to navigate the new world of relationships. Importantly, each of those 9 types has an unconscious motivation that powerfully influences how that personality habitually and predictably acts, thinks, and feels from moment to moment. Why is it so important? There was a study done at Cornell at their business school, and the study was of 72 high-performing CEOs of companies ranging from $50 million to $5 billion. And what they wanted to determine was what single trait accounted for their unusual success. And here's the line from the actual study, the conclusion of the study. They said the key predictor of success among leaders is self-awareness. Now, it was a stunning conclusion to the study, because it's nothing that the researchers expected. And I would say, as a therapist, the key predictor of success in life is self-awareness, right? Yeah. It's not just among leaders, it's our entrepreneurs. It's really self-awareness is a key predictor of success in our marriages, in our relationship with our children, with friends, with ourselves, with our higher power, if you will. I could go on and on, right? Like, understanding who you are, how you show up for life, what the motivations, the hidden motivations are that drive our ways of typically acting, thinking, and feeling. If you really understand that material, and if you will familiarize yourself particularly with the other 8 types and their predictable patterns of showing up for life, you can move through the world with so much emotional wisdom. And it will improve the quality of your life in every sphere. It's a remarkable tool.
How did you come across it?
Well, years ago, I was in graduate school. I was studying to become a psychotherapist. I went on a retreat into the mountains of Colorado, which I try to do several times a year. And there was a library in the retreat center, and I happened upon a book that was called The Enneagram. And I was like, well, I just took it off and started, thumbing through it. I'm training to be a therapist, and as I'm reading it, I am quickly sucked into it because I have been studying personality development, abnormal psychology, and I was like, where the heck has this genius thing been?
Mm-hmm.
Like why haven't I been asked to study this? Because it was so uncannily accurate. It was so accessible, actionable, even though it sounds like I'm overselling it. I mean, and perhaps this was your experience. Like, for example, when I got to my type, I was like, oh my gosh, this is uncomfortable. It feels like someone has been reading my mail.
Yep.
And it was an eye-opening experience. It explained so much about myself, about my pitfalls, my gifts, the things that I never understood about myself and other people. It was like one light bulb after another going off,
Yeah.
and that was the beginning of the journey. That was 1994.
I remember feeling the same way when I read your book and thinking, okay, somebody who doesn't know me knows more about me than a lot of people in my life. Do you equate the 9 types to personality types? Are they personality types? And how do they differ from something like Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder or something like that? Because
Right.
I know those that are listening they've dabbled in, if not dabbled, they're fully immersed in the personal development world. And there's a lot of different assessments out there online. How's the Enneagram different in that way?
Well, I love any instrument or tool that helps people develop
Mm-hmm.
self-awareness. So I like Myers-Briggs, Colby,
Yeah.
Hogan, DISC, StrengthsFinder. Fantastic, great, do them all, right? Where I think the Enneagram differs is number one, it doesn't just tell you what you do, but why you do
Mm-hmm.
it. That unconscious motivation,
Yeah.
right? Secondly, you know, uh, it reveals that what's best about you is what's worst about you, and what's worst about you is what's best about you.
Hmm.
So it doesn't pull any punches. I have a friend who likes to say, if you're looking for flattery, go take strengths finders. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like the Enneagram is just
Yeah.
honest, rigorously honest, which I think we need in order to develop. We can't ignore the shadow side of our personalities.
Yeah.
And yes, it is a personality typing system, as is, let's say, Myers-Briggs. Some of those other instruments are
Mm-hmm.
not. But I also love the fact that the Enneagram reveals that our personality operates on a continuum between health and unhealth,
Mm-hmm.
and that who we are from moment to moment continually is in a process of change as we encounter stress and times when we feel secure. Other instruments don't do
Yeah.
that. And it's not hard. I studied Myers-Briggs in graduate school. I like it, but it is not
Mm.
easy. Like you have to do a lot of study with Myers-Briggs, right? Enneagram can really be helpful to you with just a cursory amount of knowledge regarding it.
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant tool. And as soon as I did the assessment that your teams provided, I just felt seen. I felt so seen. And I also
Mm-hmm.
felt hopeful for having actionable things that I could do. And so that's, I think, so important. What I would love is to give us, an overview of what are the types, and how might we start to maybe not type ourselves, but start to see what we identify with most. Can you run us through what the 9 types are?
Sure. And let me just say this as a preface. Um, we contain all 9 types, okay? It's just that one is dominant. One sounds more like
Mm-hmm.
us than the other 8. Okay. So as I go through it, people will probably go, "Oh, that sounds like me," or "That sounds like me," or "That
Right.
sounds." Well, you're going to sound like all 9 types, but one is really going to be the one that goes, "Oh yeah, that's me." Now, obviously, I could write
Mm-hmm.
100 pages on each of these types, but I'm just going to give you a description of the unconscious motivation of each of the
Okay.
types. Okay. Ones are called the improvers. We used to call them the perfectionists, but I got more emails from people telling me that from ones who were like, stop using a pejorative term to describe me, right? So I call them the improvers, right? The unconscious motivation of the one is a need to perfect themselves, others, and the world to avoid fault and blame and
Mm.
criticism, right? Twos are called the helpers. They're warm, supportive, generous, kind, self-sacrificing. But the unconscious motivation of the two is a need to be liked, which is something we all
Sure.
want. But twos really want it, right? They really want to be liked. Uh, and their strategy for winning your appreciation is by meeting your
Mm.
need.
Is this the pleaser?
Well, there are other types that are people pleasers, but this is really someone that is always looking for opportunities to meet the needs of others, often while disavowing their own
Mm-hmm.
needs in order to win appreciation and love.
Got it.
Threes are called the achievers, or sometimes they're called the performers. Uh-oh, are you a three?
That's me.
Okay, actually, I probably could have guessed that one. Um, so threes, they're productivity machines. They are ambitious. They are competitive. They are probably no other number gets more done than Enneagram
Mm-hmm.
threes, right? The unconscious motivation of the three is a powerful need to succeed, to appear successful, and to avoid failure at all costs. You know, threes kind of see a world that tends to value people more for what they accomplish than for who they are
Mm-hmm.
inside. And so success to them, sometimes they confuse success with love. And so they have to do the work of, not over identifying with their accomplishments and their
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
right? Uh, Fours, that's me. They're called the individualists. We're kind of the unicorns of the Enneagram. We think there are more sixes than any other type
Interesting.
on the Enneagram and fewer fours in the population than any other number. Um, we are empathic. That's
Mm.
our superpower. We are very creative, rich imaginations. We are disproportionately represented in the creative arts. Fours have this feeling that there's something essential missing in their makeup that everybody else seems to
Mm.
have, but that they're missing
Mm.
inside, right? They sort of feel like they've been relegated to the aisle of misfit toys.
Interesting.
And in order to compensate for that, they unconsciously um, try to be special and unique, right? And that gets expressed sometimes in ways that are not very
Sure.
healthy, right? Fives are called the individualists. The investigators, and fives are the most analytical, detail-oriented number on the Enneagram. They're also at times the most emotionally unavailable number on the Enneagram. Often people will think they're aloof, and sometimes they are. Some people will think they're loners. Sometimes they
Mm-hmm.
are. Um, the unconscious motivation of the five is this need to collect as much information um, and knowledge as possible in order to fend off feelings of inadequacy and
Hmm.
ineptitude, right? Um, Sixes are called the loyalists. Loyalists, wow, again, warm, supportive, practical, earthy, very funny oftentimes. These are people who are worst case scenario thinkers, right? I have a friend of mine who's a six. He likes to say, I suffer from pre traumatic stress disorder, right? It's like they're always scanning the horizon
Mm-hmm.
for the next possible catastrophe and preparing for it. So their unconscious motivation is this terrible need for safety,
Mm-hmm.
security, and certainty in a what to them is a very
Mm-hmm.
chaotic and unpredictable world. Sevens, the joy bombs of the Enneagram. funny,
Mm.
great storytellers, full of life,
Yeah.
sometimes
Yeah.
toxically positive. You know what I mean? Like, I have a friend of mine who's a 7 on the Enneagram, and one time he said to me, Ian, if I ever saw a shark, I would just tell myself it was a dolphin with teeth. And I thought, oh my gosh, that is
Hmm.
just just such optimism, right? Almost to the point where you're like, okay, that's a little delusional, right? Like,
Come back to reality.
yeah, come back to reality.
Yeah.
These are people who have a deep-seated fear of being trapped in uncomfortable, painful, or distressing feelings, thoughts, or circumstances. So they're constantly thinking about a future filled with
Hmm.
unlimited possibilities of fun and adventure. Um, but yet that's kind of an escape route from having to
Yeah.
deal with life in the present moment with
Sure.
all of its attending difficulties, right? Eights are called the challengers. My mom is an eight. She likes to say, and she's 93 years old. She likes to say, I could start an argument in an empty house. I mean, like they're called the challengers for a reason. They're very assertive, notoriously blunt. Um, People will sometimes feel that they are a larger than life presence that
Hmm.
can
Hmm.
just come into a room and take it over. You know what I mean? They have a need, their unconscious motivation is a need to assert strength and power and control over others and the environment in order to mask weakness and vulnerability
Hmm.
in themselves. Mm. And then finally, nines, the peacemakers. Love these people. I'm married to one. Nines really have a need to preserve inner and outer peace. They are like the most Hakuna Matata number on the Enneagram. They just go with the flow. They're don't
Hmm.
rock the boat. They're lovely people, except here's the unconscious motivation. It's a need to maintain connection with others, and the strategy is to avoid
Hmm.
conflict at all costs. Mm. So those are, I mean,
Sure.
super, slim descriptions, but maybe somebody will go, oh, that sounds more like me than the others. So.
Yeah. I mean, when I heard them initially before I took an assessment or read your book fully, I definitely could think of a couple that I resonated with most. I think as you just go through them again, I can see myself thinking of people in my life and sort of stereotyping them or Enneagram typing them in my mind and thinking, I wonder if they're a 7 or if they're a 1. And I know the danger in that, obviously, that putting people into boxes and then thinking that we know, everything there is to know about them. Obviously, I actually posted something recently, a post that said, you think you know me, but you don't. And the reason that you think you know me is because I've only shown you parts of myself, and I still am getting to know me, right? And I am ever evolving and ever changing. And I think that's what I love so much about the Enneagram is like you said, it allows you to see like these unconscious belief systems that are driving behavior. And then when you have this awareness, it's like it puts a spotlight or a flashlight on the motivation, the deeper root cause of why you do the things that you do. And anytime in conflict
Mm-hmm.
or in relationship of any kind, I think we oftentimes, especially with people we're close to, we think we know, we just make assumptions about why they did that or why they act that way. And this actually helps us is what's really to sort of get down to the root cause of what's really behind, you know, curious, how do you, as a therapist, the reason that I do what I do? And I'm curious in relational dynamics. You mentioned that their types. How does understanding, but also as a husband, as a
Mm-hmm.
father, use the Enneagram? Your wife is a 9 and that you have kids. And I know, obviously your own type and those that you are in close relationship with. How does that impact our ability to communicate and to be in healthy relationship together?
Yeah, well, I like to say that the Enneagram provides us with a low resolution picture of the interior world of other people.
Mm.
Now, you might think everyone wants a high resolution picture, but no system is going to give you that. But think about this. Even if you got 10% more clarity about the inner experience of other people, that's a giant leap
Yeah.
forward, a huge leap forward. So, one of the things that happened for my wife and I, just being transparent, our marriage was in tough shape
Mm.
when we learned the Enneagram. And at the risk of sounding dramatic, I would say that the Enneagram may have saved my marriage after 22 years of marriage,
Mm.
right? And the reason I say that is I suddenly began to understand that the inner world of my wife and vice versa. And what came up for me was empathy, compassion, understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of like we met each other again for the very first time.
Yeah.
And it was like, I mean, my wife cried when she read about her type.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I've never had something explain myself to myself with such
Yeah.
clarity. And just that she could hand it to me and go, this is what it's like to live in my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And and then suddenly I started to realize, oh, that's why she does that, or that's why she feels that way, or that's why she thinks that way. It's not personal,
Right.
Ian. This has to do with how she's built. And so the same happens with my children. The amazing thing is that um, you know, you begin to develop this kind of wisdom in your approach to other people. You also start to learn, oh, this is how people experience me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been able, like, even in real time, I'm able to make decisions about how I relate to others because I know their types, I know my type, and I know, okay, so in this interaction, how can I how can I show up best for this other person?
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, how can I love and care for this person based on what I know about them and me?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, it definitely reduces friction in your life, relational friction. And it's just been tremendously, tremendously helpful that way. I have story after story I could tell you of ways that it's been so
Mm-hmm.
freaking
Well,
helpful.
I just think of it. It feels like not a shortcut, but an accelerated way to really get to know someone. And I think about everybody out there dating. It's like if I knew if I during the dating it would help me avoid some of the process. There was a way of getting to know somebody and I knew what their Enneagram type was, then if the complicated things that go on in dating culture today, and maybe I wouldn't take things so personally, or maybe I would communicate in a different way, and so many of us, this is all trial and error. We're showing up to you learn the lesson, you repeat the class, relationships, and we feel like we're failing, and we wonder, why is this continuing to happen over and over again? And I am always a proponent of saying, until, and a lot of us, if we were to have this information, we could learn so that we don't repeat the same, mistakes, or try to, reach somebody in a way that isn't really going to connect with them, isn't really going to resonate with them. And I remember sitting in a therapist's office with a guy that I was dating several years ago. It was the first time I'd ever been to couples counseling. And I became just acutely aware of how much in our conversation we were just missing each other. It was like we just were missing each other. We weren't understanding. We were seeing each other through our experience and perspective. And that alone. And this gives you that ability to start to have that empathy and compassion for that. I told you that I was a 3. You were like, my other person. And I think that's absolutely invaluable in regards to relationship. But I thought it was interesting what you said when I think I could have guessed that, which when you know your number, or what your predominant personality pattern is, you can start to see even the subtle nuances of the ways that it shows up in your experience. Like as soon as you said that, I was like, I wonder why he could have thought that. I want to take a quick second to invite you for an opportunity to join me for an exclusive 75-minute virtual breathwork class. Now, if you've never heard of breathwork before, this is one of the most powerful modalities that you can use to relieve stress, become more creative, sleep better, and heal yourself from the inside out. Breathwork has absolutely changed my life. And if you want to hear that story, you can find an entire podcast episode called You Are the Drug, where I actually talked to my teacher, Samantha Skelly, who helped me go through a 7-month trauma-informed breathwork facilitator program. And I'm not the same after experiencing not just that program, but learning how to use my breath as a way to calm my nervous system, as a way to regulate when I'm going through stressful or overwhelming situations, and how to really just get out of my head and into my body. The best way I can describe it is the difference between knowing that you're okay, knowing that you're loved, and actually feeling your own love for the first time. And I struggled for so many years with body dysmorphia and feeling like I was crawling out of my skin, almost like wanting to trade my body in for another one, because I had such a level of discomfort feeling anything. Breathwork helped me to feel again and love again and connect with my intuition and my creativity and my sensuality in ways that I'd been so blocked from, I thought I would never be able to reconnect with. But breathwork helped me do that. And I want to offer you guys an opportunity to experience that for yourself. I've had such an enormous response from the clients that I work with around how transformational this has been for them. So I've decided to host a monthly breathwork class, and you can join me virtually from anywhere in the world. It's 75 minutes in a facilitated, safe space with other breathers. And all you have to do to join is go to my Stan store. You can find it on my Instagram or TikTok link in bio. We'll also put the link in the show notes for you to make it super easy. It's only $25 to join. We have upcoming sessions in July on the 13th and August on the 11th. And we're trying this out. So if there is an enormous response, we're going to continue to add more classes. But this is our opportunity that we want to provide for you guys to join me in our upcoming class on July 13th. So go over to the link that's in the show notes for breathwork and you can sign up there. All right, without further ado, we'll jump back into the episode. Well, it's probably because, one, I take pride in my image, in the way that I look. Maybe the fact that, the show that you're on right now is called the Coachable podcast, and it's all about bettering yourself and getting more done. All the ways that it expresses in my life unconsciously that I, care about achieving, and I care about winning, and I care about, being competitive, but I also care about, all the ways that it shows up. And so often we're unaware of that. And sometimes we're way more obvious than we think we are.
Yes. So let me just give you an example of how this would help. If you and I spent a lot of time together, we forged a really strong friendship. One of the things, if I knew the Enneagram, right, is I would begin to communicate to you that I value you for who you are inside, not for what you've accomplished. Like, I don't care how many Instagram followers you are, how big you are on TikTok, how big your podcast is. I would try to communicate to you that our relationship was built on my genuine care and love for you, and that love has nothing to do with your achievements in life. And I would just know that because you're a 3. Mm-hmm. And I would know that that was the most helpful thing in the world for you. And if I didn't know it, I'd be kind of, like you said, maybe not connecting in a way that would be helpful.
Yeah. So you have a new book out called The Story of You. How is The Story of You different than The Road Back to You? And why did you feel like this was the next step? And why was this like really what you wanted to share at this point?
Yeah.
What's the premise of the Story of You?
Well, all of us tell ourselves and others a story about who we are and how we think the world works, right? We understand our lives narratively, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even have to explain it. People know this is true. Now, we develop a story in childhood very early on. based on internalized messages, sometimes trauma, um, you know, messages we get from the important people in our life, coaches, parents, siblings. The story is sometimes not awesome, but it's
Mm-hmm.
something at least we can hang our hat on developmentally.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when we drag that story unconsciously into adulthood, it begins to wreak havoc on our lives, right? It
Yeah.
can really make a mess of our lives. Now, I don't think the Enneagram just tells us about 9 personality styles. I think it also shows us the 9 stories that people tend to gravitate toward and adopt in childhood. And I want to tell people, guess what? It's not working for you as an adult, right? Like, let's take you, for
Yeah.
example. I don't know how, but you picked up the message as a little person that I have to win. I have to be
Yep.
successful. I've got to be the person that can get a lot done and really look good doing it. I mean, and
Yes.
it's like, now you unconsciously bring that story into adulthood. You might become a workaholic and it tanks your marriage or your relationship with your
Mm-hmm.
children. You
Mm-hmm.
you get on a treadmill of success, and you know where that can lead. And so
Mm-hmm.
the story helped you as a little person make sense of the world and get your needs met, but not as an
Right.
adult, right?
Yeah.
And so helping people realize, wait a minute, I can change the story. Like, I have
Mm-hmm.
agency and freedom to rewrite the narrative of my life in a way that, I can take responsibility for the story. I can become live in a story that's more aligned with my values and who I actually am as a human being. And it's
Right.
amazing to me when you tell people that, they look at you like you just invented fire. I mean, they're just like, "Oh my gosh, like, you mean I'm not
Mm-hmm.
stuck with this old story?" And I'm like, "Nope, you have all the agency you need to change the narrative of your life." And that's what that book is about.
Well, and that can be absolutely terrifying for so many of us. It's like to that egoic story that we're so attached to and we think it's who we are. It's like, who would I be without it?
Mm.
It's scary. We don't know who we are without that story so often. And but it can also open up this amazing, you know, future of possibilities of who am I? Who am I really before I learned that I am what I do, right? Because that was the story
Right.
for me. It's I am what I do. And I was even
Hmm.
thinking before this interview about I think about this a lot in just my own personal work and around healing this story and where it originated from. And I actually had a good friend on my show recently when we were talking a lot about play. And I think at a very early age, play stopped being play and it started being competition when there
Hmm.
was a winner and a loser. And I saw the winners got praise and validation and recognition and love and were celebrated and taken out to eat and all of the things. And I wanted that. And so I learned, oh, well, when I get good grades and when I uh, strike someone out and when I win the pageant or whatever it is, I get love and approval and validation. And that's stayed with me for so many years. And it's that story of I am what I do for me is being worked on by like beingness. How do I connect to my beingness and who I am without my accomplishments, and the value that comes from just being Tori, right? And it's fascinating to think that I've been so connected to that story my whole life, but there's a story that all of us have and all of the types have. I know you mentioned, the story or the different types. What would be the story for the types that you mentioned? So if the improver or the perfectionist, like what would their story be?
Yeah, so the broken story of the one says that if I want to feel safe, have the ability to affect the environment, and um, and be loved, I have to be perfect. I have to perfect others. I have to perfect the world. I have to avoid mistakes. I have to be appropriate. I have to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that helps a little person
Yeah.
kind of make sense of the world and get their needs met. And they get
Mm-hmm.
stroked for it, right? If you think about it, like little ones hear this message, oh, she's so responsible. She makes her bed perfectly. Her handwriting is perfect. And she does this, on and on and on. And that little kid starts to go, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
That means if I just keep being perfect, then I'm going to get a whole lot of love.
Yeah.
Or sometimes they may have a parent that is, telling them all the time they're not enough,
Mm.
or that they have to be perfect. And they're like, okay, well, then I'm just going to follow that because I'm afraid that if I don't do it, that person's going to withhold love from me. So, these stories get
Of course.
constructed out of a lot of sources. And now we all know perfectionists as adults, right?
Yeah.
And they can be tortured by inner critics and voices
Mm-hmm.
that say you're never enough, you're never enough, you've got to do better, you've got to live up to these high internal standards. If they're not very self-aware, they can be judgmental and critical of others who don't do things their way because their way is always the right way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it makes a mess of their lives, right?
Yeah.
And it's like you have to be kind to yourself, right? You have to exercise self-compassion and say, of course that's the story I picked up. I didn't sign up for that story. It's just the story I unconsciously picked up as a
Mm-hmm.
little kid. But now I have to unwind it and write a different story. And
Yeah.
in the story of you, I actually kind of outline a process for how we can begin that journey of rewriting the story, um, that we adopted as a little kid and, get ourselves a new one.
Yeah, because I would imagine, that whoever that little one is so afraid of messing up, so afraid of getting
Oh,
in
yeah.
trouble, so afraid of, maybe they watch their sibling get in trouble and they're like, okay, don't do that. So I'll learn to be,
Right.
exactly like teacher's pet or mom's,
Right.
doing exactly what mom wants. And all the ways that we unconsciously learn how to adapt in order to survive and get our
Yeah.
needs met, like you said. Um,
Hmm.
for the two, what does that look like for the two?
Well, the broken story of the two is based upon this mistaken notion that they have to not acknowledge their own needs, but constantly be meeting the needs of others, always
Mm,
helping, always being there, always um, presenting this very cheerful, bubbly, I can do anything for you sort of a thing. And
mm-hmm.
they have to face up to the fact that sometimes their giving is calculated. It's strategic. It's a way to win the appreciation and love of others. It can be manipulative if they're
Sure.
not careful. And but the truth of the matter is, a two has to learn in the new story. Wait a minute, I can be loved apart from my doing things for others.
Mm-hmm.
I am not what I do for others, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and now I've already
Yeah.
done the three. I've sort of spoken about
Right.
your broken story.
Mm-hmm.
For the four, me, it's like I've had to learn, like, Ian, there's nothing missing inside of you.
Mm,
Like, you don't have to keep comparing yourself to other people and coming out at the short end of the stick. You you are an amazingly empathic and artistic and imaginative person, but you don't have to compensate for what you perceive as this missing piece by being special and unique all the time, right?
there's nothing
So
wrong with
that's the
you.
beginning of self-awareness and going, oh
Sure.
man, I can, and I can just tell you that when I dragged that story into adulthood, I ended up becoming an alcoholic and a drug addict.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, the
Sure.
pain of that story made a mess of my 20s, you know?
Yeah, I can
And
imagine that story of like something's wrong with me or I'm broken or like, yeah,
yeah,
I'm defective. Everybody else's
yes,
came well packaged and there's just something wrong with me.
yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
For the five, really, that story is that the world makes too many demands on me, particularly in the relational sphere, and I have to hold on to the few resources I have. And so, one of the ways that I can begin to feel safe in the world is by just aggregating as much knowledge and information as I can, by kind of limiting the amount of time that I spend with others, uh, and to prevent intrusion by others. And there's a scarcity mindset. It's like, I only have so much.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, the new story has to do with developing a mindset of abundance.
Hmm.
That the more I give to others, the more I'll receive,
Sure.
And so the broken story of the six is, if I just stay ready, if I just stay like, I don't know, how do I want to say it? If I just keep mentally preparing for the worst, then I'm going to be safe in this world.
I
Then
imagine that
that just,
shows up as like hypervigilance and constantly on
oh,
guard, just in a very aroused state all the time of like preparing for the worst. Because if I can prepare for the worst, then it won't hurt as bad if it happens. If I already knew it,
right.
saw it
And
coming.
yeah, and in relationships, like sixes really struggle with self-doubt and self-questioning.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always looking, sometimes they're always looking they perceive others as being having more authority than they have, like on different topics. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I think that it is hard to go through life in this hypervigilant state. But here's the thing, like, I know sixes will say to me something like, this is not an atypical story. I grew up in an alcoholic family where the unpredictable could happen at any moment all the time. So I learned.
To be on
So
guard.
you see, like, to be always like
Mm-hmm.
vigilant, like what's going to go wrong here, like
Mm-hmm.
what could, and it's like, well, of course you did. Be kind to yourself. How else, that's how you survive. But
Sure.
when you bring that story into adulthood, like, for example, people may perceive you as always being a wet blanket who's going to see what's going to go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be
Mm-hmm.
afraid to take chances. You may become somebody that, for some sixes, have an aggressive posture toward the world as a defense against against danger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for sevens, the broken story is essentially, I would say it like this: I'm going to have to take care of myself because there's no one else here. And the way that I'm going to fend off my anxiety is by having this crazy optimism that everything's great, everything's going to be great, we're going to have fun. Life is an adventure. And I had to stay so future focused in order to um, keep running from my own anxiety about painful feelings and circumstances and thoughts. Man, that's a broken story. Like, let me tell you something. When little sevens, or let's say, you're a seven and you're in high school, it wouldn't be unusual for a seven to be voted class clown, right? And that really works for you as a 15-year-old. But I'm just saying, when you're a class clown still at 35, it's not a good thing,
Yep. That,
you know?
yes. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah,
So
because those
eights,
people seem flighty, or they seem maybe that they lack responsibility at times, or that they're always looking for the next best thing, and that maybe they struggle with commitment and really grounding into certain
oh,
experiences.
yeah, oh, absolutely. Really, the danger for sevens in adulthood is that they become Peter Pan, like they
Mm-hmm.
just never want to grow up. And
Mm-hmm.
eights, the broken story they have is that we live in a dog eat dog universe in which the strong always dominate the weak, and they have just decided as a little person, I will never be weak. I am going to be the strongest person in the room, and you know,
Yeah.
again, helps you as a little person, but man, you bring that into adulthood, and people will experience you as intimidating, as overwhelming,
Right.
maybe as being a bully in your worst expression of
Mm-hmm.
yourself. And you know, again, that doesn't make a lot of friends in adulthood. And nine's the broken story
Mm-hmm.
they really tell themselves is that their presence doesn't matter as
Sure.
much as other people's. And the danger then in adulthood is that you start to merge with the preferences, opinions, and viewpoints and life agenda of other people, right? You become supportive of other people, but you never find your own voice.
Right.
You just don't individuate. And you know, again, my wife's a nine, and she was, I don't know what point she said this, but she realized she was a nine, and one day she woke up and she said, "I've never found my own
Mm-hmm.
voice." I've got to go out there and
Mm-hmm.
find out who I am and live that story, not just always be supporting other people's stories in the interest of keeping the peace all
Yeah.
the time, you
Yeah.
know?
Of course.
So I don't know. It's pretty powerful stuff.
It's extremely powerful. And I know in your book, you tell a story about Don Miller, who I love his work and grew up reading his books. And I'd love it if you would share that story, because you talk about how he took this journey of being in a story and then stepping out of that story and writing a new one. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I've had the privilege of being a good friend of Don's for years. In fact, I just had dinner with him and his
Mm,
wife on my wife and the Millers got together for dinner on a Saturday night. So Don, when I first met Don, he was about 100 pounds overweight, and he was kind of a little bit of a artsy lost soul. You know what I mean? And one day he just decided this story is not working for me.
mm-hmm.
Like the story I tell myself about who I am and the way the world is doesn't work for me. And he said, in the new story, I'm not going to be 100 pounds overweight. So he gets on a bike, he bikes across the country and loses 100 pounds. I don't know how many pounds, but I don't know, 50, 60 pounds en route to 100 pounds. And he just began to rewrite that story and became the person he is today, which is a very successful um, consultant around branding with major corporations, politicians, and others. Don is as different as night and day from the guy I met, you know,
Yeah.
10 years ago. And he would credit that transformation with the changing of the story he told himself about who he was. And so he's actually a really good avatar for what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think, and that's the possibility that is available for all of us. It's like if we can start to
Yeah.
see that the story that we've adopted that helped us survive got us here, but it's likely not serving us anymore. And open up
No.
to what is the story that we want to tell? What what
Hmm.
would serve us, and how would our lives look completely different? How could they evolve and unfold if we allowed ourselves to let go of this narrative that we're not enough, or that we are what we do, or that our voice doesn't matter, or whatever it might be for us. And I think this is the work. This is the essential work, a healing work that we're all, here to do. It's like we've forgotten who we truly are, and then we pick up this mask and we play this role, and then the healing is learning how to take the mask off and to come back to the truth of who we've always been, which is, loved and valuable and creative and playful and all of the things that we were before we learned that we had to survive, or who we thought we needed to be. I think it's invaluable, and I'd love to know what types of resources are out there for people who are either just getting their feet wet. This is maybe the first time they've heard about the Enneagram, or those who maybe they've read your first book, but they want to know more and to go deeper. What resources are available for people? Where would you point people if they're interested in knowing more?
Well, obviously, one is they could go to my website, IANMORGANCRON, ianmorgancron.com. They could take the IEQ 9 Enneagram assessment to learn their type. I would recommend The Road Back to You. I know it sounds self-promotional, but look, it's the only primer, the only introduction on the market, right? That's readable and kind of understandable,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Because the Enneagram can get quite, when you read a lot of the books on the Enneagram, they can be quite long and clinical,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, the Road Back to You is a good, fun, simple read, but still full of enough solid content that you'll walk away with, really good stuff. The Story of You, you could jump in on that one and just say, okay, man, I want to start with this narrative stuff. I have courses. The Discover You course on my website would be one. Um, so that's some good starting
Mm-hmm.
places for people
Yeah.
to jump in on that journey of self-discovery and
Yeah.
self-awareness. And I get this is one of those things that's amazing to I can really say, without being like a snake oil salesman, this really works.
I
You
don't you
know,
love it when you've come across something that you believe in so much and that you've seen the results in over and over and over again that you can confidently say like this can actually change your life. If you're available for that and you're ready for that, this can change your life. And that
yeah,
is the best thing
there,
to
yeah.
promote.
I mean, legit. I mean, it is so helpful. It's like such a game changer.
Hmm.
It's and there's a lot at stake, you know.
Man.
If you don't develop self-awareness and self-knowledge, you will bang guardrail to guardrail through other people's lives. You will not understand why you continue to make
Hmm.
the same mistakes over and over and over again. You will not live into becoming the highest expression of yourself in the world.
Hmm.
That's a big,
Yeah.
that's a lot of
There's
stake,
a
right?
lot on the line. It's costing us so much to not know why we do the things we do and
Hmm.
where it comes from. And the payoff of being willing to look at that story and being willing to be honest with ourselves and look in the mirror beyond just the masks that we've worn. Like it might get uncomfortable and it might not, it might be revealing and it might require us to confront some things, but it's the payoff is everything. It's everything. That's why
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
so
for sure.
committed to this work, and I know you are too. And you have a podcast of your own that, man, like 20 million people are obsessed with. So can you tell people where they can find that as well?
Yeah, it's called Typology,
Hmm.
Typology, and it is an Enneagram based podcast on which I interview people of different types and listen to their stories and really explore them in depth. And sometimes I'll talk about your type, but sometimes I'll be talking to a seven and you go, oh my gosh, that's my brother
Yeah.
Bob. And then you'll learn a ton about your brother Bob by listening to someone else talk about what it's like to be a
Hmm.
seven. And so it's a really fun show, sometimes very moving, other times, laugh out loud kind of
Yeah.
material. But um, yeah, it has resonated with an audience of people that want to become more self-aware and aware of other people,
Right.
you know?
Right. Well, and that's what this is all about is how can I show up in the best way, contribute, be of service, but also just like let myself be known and seen and loved for who I am. So thank you so much for the work that you do and the impact that it's had on me. And I know this audience, I so appreciate. You're welcome back anytime. We can always go deeper. And I hope people will go grab the book, go grab the story of you or the road back to you. Look Ian up on his website and on social media. We will put links to all of that in the show notes, so we make it super easy for you guys to find him and get involved in what he's doing. And any last words you want to share with us before we end?
Yeah, I used to say on my show, and I love this quote. You've heard it: "Be yourself. Everybody else is already taken."
Yeah.
And I think part of the journey with the Enneagram is learning how to be yourself in the world and discover that who you are is absolutely beautiful.
I love that. I agree. All right, Ian, thank you for being on the show. You guys, if you loved this, please let us know by leaving a rating and review. That's the best way you can say thank you and acknowledge the value that you're getting here and helps us get this show out to more people. I appreciate you, love you. Go be coachable. And yeah, let me know what Enneagram you are. If you find out, if you take the assessment, which I highly recommend, um, I would love to know. Maybe you guys can leave me a comment or send me a DM on Instagram, and we can powwow over our Enneagram numbers.
We just released a new product. This is actually important. It's an Enneagram couples report.
Ooh,
So, for example, Tori, you could take this with your partner, and the test will tell you in a 44-page report how your type and your partner's type get along. It reveals your
interesting.
blind spots, your opportunities, your growth points, your challenges, your decision making styles. I mean, it just covers a lot of territory. And I am so excited about it because people ask me all the time, geez, how does it, I'm a four, my husband is an eight, how do we get along? What are the dynamics like? And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
go take the couples
Yeah.
report. It'll really show you.
Okay, I'm definitely interested in that. All right, you guys, thank you for being here. Love you. See you next week on the Coachable Podcast.